Hey there, developers. Today, I'm diving into why you should consider switching to identity management services like Keycloak, Okta, Auth0, Google Firebase, Amazon Cognito, Microsoft Entra ID, Oracle, and more. These services offer a multitude of benefits, and I'm here to break them down for you. First up, enhanced security. Identity management services are built with robust encryption and security protocols. They receive regular security updates and patches, ensuring your data remains secure. Plus, they support multi-factor authentication, which adds an extra layer of protection. In today's world, you can't afford to skimp on security. Next, scalability. As your user base grows, these services can effortlessly handle the load. They integrate seamlessly with multiple applications, making it easier than ever to scale your projects. Compliance is another critical factor. With built-in support for regulations like GDPR and CCPA, these services simplify your audit processes. Staying compliant has never been this straightforward. Let's talk about user experience. Single sign-on capabilities mean users can access multiple applications with just one set of credentials. Social login options and self-service password reset features enhance the user experience even further. Happy users mean less hassle for your support team. Reduced development time is a game changer. With pre-built authentication flows, SDKs and APIs, integrating these services into your applications is a breeze. Spend less time on authentication and more on developing core functionalities. Cost effectiveness is another major pro. Lower maintenance costs and a reduced need for in-house security expertise translate to significant savings. It's a win-win. Advanced features like user analytics and reporting, adaptive authentication, and anomaly detection give you deeper insights and more sophisticated security measures. These features are often out of reach for in-house solutions. Centralized user management is a big plus. Having a unified view of user identities across systems makes user provisioning and deprovisioning a lot simpler. Say goodbye to scattered user data. Flexibility is key. These services support various authentication protocols like OAuth and SAML, and are highly customizable to fit your specific project needs. Whether you're a startup or an enterprise, there's a solution that fits. Finally, focusing on your core projects. By outsourcing complex identity management tasks, you can allocate more resources to project-critical development. Let the experts handle the security so you can focus on innovation. There you have it. Top reasons to switch to identity management services: enhanced security, scalability, compliance, improved user experience, reduced development time, cost effectiveness, advanced features, centralized user management, flexibility, and the ability to focus on your core projects. It's time to make the switch and elevate your identity management game. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tech insights. Catch you in the next video.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you had fun watching that short video there, so you can kind of guess what I will going to talk about today. So if you're not familiar with my channel, I would really suggest to look at some of the videos that I make that actually spans through various different technologies, especially the last 3-4 videos that I made. It was related to full stack development using user authentication on various platforms. So if you go to the playlist on my channels, you'll end up in here, and this is the series that I'm going to add the video on today. So the full stack web development, if you click on it, you will see something like this. And like in these 4 videos, I talked about an Angular front end that was doing user authentication, and of course backend, it could be anything. It was I think I showed MySQL database, I showed MongoDB using Springboot, and then I also showed using Express.js and Node.js, and on the back end, MongoDB. And all of those are using JWT authentication. So this was a database-centric authentication. And if you have watched my last video, if you have not, I will really suggest please do. At the end, I mentioned that system is good. It has been working, and this process is okay, but it has certain drawbacks. And what are the drawbacks? Well, let's talk about it. So, in short, very simply, in a traditional authentication system, what you have is something like this. And this is what we have today. If you looked at my previous videos, user logs in. We have an application, and let's say we have application one, that's just one app, and that needs to go to the database for authentication, check the user ID and passwords and all the user information in there, and then, of course, authenticate the user, and then the user gets to look at the data. Same thing, if there's a different application, that application also has to do some kind of authentication. If it happens to be a separate database and separate system completely, they need to do that, and so on. So all these applications now is using all these various databases for authentication, and then user has to remember all these different authentication. So that is the drawback on the system that I just mentioned in the last 4 videos. How do you solve it? Well, this is where the industry is going. This is what they're saying, that instead of logging it through a specific database, what you do is you use an identity management system. So user logs in and the application uses a trusted source energy management system. So they delegate that authentication to that system, and that system, figures out if this is a valid user and all that, and provides some response back, like some kind of answer back. Is it good or bad? If it's good, then the application will let you in into their data. Otherwise, no. So that's same thing. Other web applications are going to do the same thing, same identity provider, let's say. And these trusted identity providers are something that I'm sure you have seen in social logins, like Facebook, Google, GitHub, and there are other also. They're like Keycloak. There is Amazon has something like Incognito. There's Microsoft has some. Google has Firebase. They provide identity management service like that. So that those you can use that. So that is basically what we are going to talk about, that how to change our application to use the entity service to give access to our data. So let's see how that's going to look first. So this is what we're talking about. So this is our application. If you look at my previous video, you will see that application. The only change is I have added these logins, right? Login with Okta. You can also log in with the traditional way, log into the database, putting user ID password, but we can delegate the login to a different identity management service called Okta. That's actually a commercial product, but we'll talk about it. You can get a free developer access. And then you can also do social logins, right? That's also possible. So let's see. Okay, we'll try to log in normally first. Of course, the database login. This was, done before, so nothing fun with that. It's actually going to the database to the authentication, whether it's MySQL and MongoDB or MongoDB with Express.js or Springboot. So that's no fun, but now what's going to happen is I'm going to go ahead and log in using a third party, right? So there is Okta, so I'm going to go ahead and click on login with Okta. So now what's happening is you can see it's a different URL. So it is delegating the authentication to someone else. And I'm going to go ahead and log in. I have this user that I know and I sign in. And once I'm signed in, it actually puts me back to my actual data because it authenticated and it gave me a good thumbs up, and my application knows that now it's good and it gives you access. So I'm gonna log out, and what I'm gonna do is let's try with other log type login. Like this is the social login that that you always see. So now I can also log in through any of these platforms. So that's kind of neat about this. And it's also delegated to a different provider, authentication provider, right? And of course, you can see this is my application that's trying to log in. And I'm going to go ahead and log in using Google, let's say, and I'm going to choose this user ID and it's authenticated, and I'm back in. So that's basically the idea. So this existing application, what we have is I have added this other authentication provider that we can use to log in. So that is what I'm going to talk about today. Okay, before I start, I just want to clarify and disclaimer, I do not work for any of this company. Okay, I just used it because I happen to get free developers account, so I just use it. That's it. I could have used it pretty much Google Firebase. I could have used it Amazon Incognito, and Keyclose is free actually. So that's another thing you could use. So again, I'm not associated with any of these companies. I just used it because of my free account. The first thing you're going to need to run this is you're going to need an Okta developer's account, and I'm going to put all of these links with my GitHub page for this code, and also it will be down in the description below of this video. So here, there's a lot of options, right? Uh, don't choose this one for Okta with the second login options that I showed you. This one, you're going to need this guy. So get an account on this sign up free developer edition. So that's the one you need. Access to Okta developer edition services, right? Once you have an account, and I think it's free they give you free for 30 days or something, go ahead, log in. And once you log in, you're going to see something like this. Once you log in, you will see something like this. So this is, as you can see, this is a developer account, and this is, you will have something like this, like a dev, blah, 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 some number, and an admin. So you're logged in as admin. The very first thing you want to do is you want to go ahead and click on this directory and then go to the profile editor. And of course, I have a whole bunch of profile that you could see, and you could go to the default profile, and then there you will have all kinds of default attributes, username, first name, last name, blah, 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 blah. But you wanted to add a custom attribute called user ID, right? The way you do it is you basically click on this add attribute and just say display name. You could call it username, it doesn't matter. The variable, of course, would be user ID, right? You wanted to say user ID like this. And then description, you could put whatever you want. And you could put some a specific validation. You don't need to. I didn't put anything. And make sure you click on this. Yes, attribute is required. Okay, and then just hit save. So that way, all it does is whenever you're trying to add a user, it will also make sure that someone puts the user ID in there. So the key thing to do it is make sure your variable name is called user ID. So that's what that will be used in the claims. Okay, and here you can put whatever you want. It doesn't matter. I have already added it, so I'm not adding it. As you could see, my display name is this, so you can call it whatever you want. But this is the variable name that's what you want. This is custom, right? After you have done that, go back to people right here, and then click and add person. Right, I already have a whole bunch of people added in here. So if you click add person, and you can just add a sample user, right? Just put a first name, last name, and again, it's got to be an email. So make sure it doesn't have to be valid, but you can validate it if you want. I mean, you don't need necessarily to put a valid email, but it's good to put a valid email, like a Gmail account or something. And then here is what we just added: the required the field user ID. So there you put your user ID. Now make sure this user ID is something that is already existing in the database, and we'll talk about that. So basically, when you log in, what happens is the system says that yes, this user is valid, and then our application compares this user ID with what we have in the database, and if it's a valid user ID, then it will give it access. So that's how it kind of works. So anyway, once you have done all that, I've already added a whole bunch of users, so I'm not going to do it. Go ahead, click save. So that way you have a user. So that's all you need first. Then what you want to do is go to applications and click on applications, and you're going to create an application integration so that it is basically will talk to your Angular application that you're going to have. So that's what I got. So click on create new app integration, choose OIDC. This is OpenID Connect. Choose single page applications because that is what it is. It is an Angular application. And again, SAML2 is another way to do it, but this is what I chose because that's where industry is going. This is basically an implementation of Auth2. Then hit next, and it will give you all this. You can change the application to whatever you want, and you can choose a logo, upload a logo. Feel free to do that. Like from the Angular directory that I have, you can choose that logo and leave everything default. Change this to 4200 because we're using Angular, and then they change that one to Okta-callback because that is the URI that is the Angular is going to listen to actually get the response back. And of course, this you definitely want 4200. Anywhere you see by default 800, put it to 4200 because we are going back to Angular. And then you could choose allow everyone in your organization to access. So that's absolutely okay for now. And then you could go ahead and hit save. And this should automatically create an application for you. And it will look something like this. Now, once an application is created, of course, you're going to have a client ID like this, right? And then I do not use this client ID because that's what I'm using. And it may not work because other stuff is not correct. So let me show you what I have. So of course I got this client ID, and then the rest of the stuff that you see, these are automatically going to be created. So you don't need to worry about that. And I got all of these things filled out as you can see. Okay. So once that is done, what you want to do is you want it to go to security, and then you want it to go to API, because you're going to have to, on the server side, you're going to have to verify the token. So you're going to have at this step. Then go ahead, click on this default, and then you go to claims, and this is what you want to do is you want to click on add claims, because one of the things you wanted to add is, remember we added that user ID thing. You wanted to make sure that that also comes in as part of the token itself, so that you can grab it on your server side or your client side and verify it. This will automatically be there, so you need to worry about that. So the way you do that is you add claims, and you could call it user ID. That's what I would do. And then leave this default, and then leave all this default. The value, this is kind of like what Okta uses. User is their name of their object, and then you want to say user.user ID, kind of like that, right? And you can say any scope is fine, and then you can say create. I'm not going to do that because I've already done that, as you can see. So this is how it looks like. So make sure you add that, otherwise you're not going to get the application that you're going to check out and configure is not going to work. Okay, so that's all you need to do here. I think we're all done with the Okta. And then one more thing is you go to application, and then you got to go to assign users to app. You could do it that way, or you could click on the specific application, and you could go to assignment. Make sure you choose your application that you just created, and then you go ahead and click on assign and say assign to people, right? Now, when this comes up, it will actually show you the list of users that you have already added. Remember, we added that user in that step through this directory people. That user will be there. So make sure you add that user in there. So let me actually show you what that is. If I click on edit. So make sure you fill out this user ID, because the rest of the stuff should be filled out automatically. But make sure you fill out this user ID to be the user ID that you put it in that place that you when you edit it, and also that matches with what you have in one of the users that you are going to use in the database. Okay, so that step is very important. Then you're done. The next thing we're going to have to do is, so this was the setup for Okta. Now we're going to set up for this, all the social logins. Again, I have used the platform called Auth0, which recently I think got bought by Okta. So again, we don't have to use Auth0. We can actually use any other platform. I just happened to use it because it was easy for me to use, and also it's something that I wanted to learn as well. Anyway, like I said before, I'm not associated with any of those companies. The first thing you want to do is go to this site. I'm going to put this link again in the description below, and also in the GitHub, and go ahead and sign up. It's free. You don't have to pay any money. For developers, you can just sign up with a free plan. And once you sign up and you log in, you should get something like this. Okay, so this is what you should get once you log in after registering with Auth0. The first thing you wanted to do is, of course, again, you wanted to create an application, because that's the application you wanted to actually connect from your app. So go to applications, click on this. As you could see, I already have one application. Do not use any of these client IDs. You're going to click on create application, and then choose whatever you want. I just called my user management. Then this is definitely a single page application, so you're going to choose this, and then you can click on create, and it will automatically create the application thing for you. And again, these are just you can choose Angular, and because that's what we are using, and then it just gives you a quick start of what codes you're going to need. Feel free to take a look at this. We don't necessarily have to know all this because I'm going to go over with these codes, not this code, but the code that I have to update. But of course, this is definitely can help you if you are seeing this for the first time and try to have an understanding. All right, we want to go to settings, and then again, you'll see your changes here, whatever applications you called it, and make sure you write these down. You need to know your domain. This is going to be your auth0 domain name. This is going to be your client ID, right? This is how your application would know to connect to this service, and this service would identify that you are the application. Don't worry about the client secret for now. We're not going to use that. And you can put an application logo. Of course, feel free to use the one that I have used. You can use this one if you want. I don't mind. And then keep all this default. In the callback URL, you definitely want to put this if you're going to use the application that I'm talking about, because the auth0 callback URL goes in there. And as you remember, the Okta callback goes in Okta-callback. So that's what that should be. And then, of course, in your logout URL, you wanted to put this. In allowed origins, you want to put that because those are the host and port for Angular that we're going to use. And the rest of them, you can pretty much leave it empty. You don't need to worry about it. And you can go ahead and hit save. So then you should have an application in place. So the next thing you want to do is, after having the application created, you want it to give access to the API. So click on the API and then click on create API and just put whatever name you want. In my case, I put user management API access. And then in your identifier, what you could do is you could put something like this. So make sure you put that, because that is very important, because that is what I have used as an identifier. It's just basically kind of like an ID for this app, the auth0 to identify your application. All right, and put whatever you want in this name. That's not a problem. And then hit create, and you can choose everything default. What that will do, that will provide an API audience like this, and that will definitely be helpful for us and from Angular to connect to this service. So that's all you would need. Okay, you survived so far. So once you have all of those applications configured in Okta and Auth0, the next step is to set up some environment variable based on what we have received from those application configuration, right? So let's look at it. You need to set up all of these environment variables. The Okta client ID, if you go look at the application that you added in the Okta, there will be Okta client ID. Make sure you copy that and paste it in here. The Okta Auth0 domain, do not use this. This is mine while I was showing you. When you registered your developer account, you will have some dev dash some other ID. So make sure you use that. So this should be unique for yourself, and you're gonna have to add the rest of them as is. https:// and OAuth to default. But this piece, it has to be your own developer account that you got. All right. Auth0 audience, you need to put it as this, because that is what we added for Auth0 when we added the API, if you remember. Auth0 domain, if you go back to the application that we added in Auth0, and you will see that there's an Auth0 domain. It has to be something like, something.auth0.something. So go ahead, add that. It will be literally in there. You can just copy it once you look at the application that you added. So that's all you would need. Then we'll go to the next step. Okay, the next thing is pretty simple. You just got to go to my GitHub page, like copy this link, and make sure you check out the source code. And this link will be, of course, in the video's description below. And then once you copy this, then I typically like to check out in my command prompt. So I'm only using Windows, but use whatever platform you have. So you want to do git clone in this. That will definitely check it out, and you'll have the code. I have already done that, so I'm not going to do that. Once you do it, definitely go to this folder, right? User management, and then use your editor. Now, I know that I have been using Visual Studio Code, but I started using Cursor actually, and it's actually a very, again, I don't work for Cursor. I don't work for that company, or any other AI company, but I found it's extremely useful using Visual Studio Code. In fact, the code that I have done on my Angular and on my Springboot, a lot of debug errors that I was able to resolve fairly quickly. I mean, some there's kind of, but most of it was able to find it using the AI that it has a built-in agent. It's extremely powerful. So again, in my case, I typically do this cursor space dot, and that brings up the Visual Studio Code with cursor plugin, right? So this is what it looks like. So Studio Code a little different. It's made of stuff on the left. The stuff is like your icons are on the top. And of course, anytime I want to look at anything, or if I have any questions on any code, I can, let's say, click on one of these code right here, uh, for instance. And then if I have questioned something or I want to do something, I could just hit Control L, and this gives me the prompt here. I can ask anything to AI, and it will actually tell me what it is. And you can literally apply the code right here. So it is extremely helpful, and it speeds up your development a lot. If I have time a little bit, then I'll probably show you. But for now, let's talk about the code. The first thing you wanted to do in here in the code is you wanted to go to this file right here, env file. And again, the reason you have to do this here is because the way I have it set it up, Angular automatically, see, Angular runs on the client side. So when it runs, it doesn't have any idea on the server side environment. But I'm running it right now when building the actual code, building the actual uh, client code, it will actually pick it up from my current environment. That's why I have to do it this way, and it's actually very efficient. So in this file, you definitely wanted to, I filled up some of this thing already, already there. Similar thing, auth0 domain, as we talked about, you had those in the um, environment variable, copy the auth0 domain, put the auth0 client ID, which you also have from there. Then this is already there, don't worry about that. Auth0 audience is the audience that we talked about. This will literally be uh, this. So actually, I'm just going to put it there because it's not going to change. So your Auth0 audience would be this. And then your Okta client ID is your Okta client ID, which is something else I've set up on the environment variable. You need to copy that and put it here as well. And Okta auth2 domain is what I showed you right here. It is basically, this is what you want, but of course, do not use this. This is my ID. You will have your own developer ID that you can use. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So make sure you copy this entire thing right here, and that becomes your Auth0, Okta Auth2 domain. So all of these things, make sure you have it set up. Once you have it set up, voila, you're good to go. Now that you have all of that set up, you should be able to run the application. So I already have all of this command prompt open right here, and you could do this by going to terminal and any of your terminal command prompt that you are interested in. So I have in the right directory, like in the client Angular, that's what you want to be, and you want to do npm install, right? I've already done it, so I'm not going to do it again. It's going to run for some time, and it will actually automatically copy the environment and everything for you, and then it will run, right? So then you wanted to do npm start once that is successful. npm start will, of course, copy that environment and everything, and then start your application. And initially, this one I actually have it set up for to run the Express. I'll show you the Node.js piece that it's working. npm start, and there it is. And the Node.js is up and running. And then we're going to go ahead and try our application and to see if it's working or not. So we're going to go here. Actually, we already have one open, so we can go there. And then there it is. Application is up. Of course, first thing you want to try is log in as a normal database user that I have it here. And as you can see, it logs in. Everything is fine. All is good. And I could go back to here. And you can see that stuffs are coming in. All good. Then I'm going to log out. And then I'm going to try this as my Okta. And my Okta login goes to the right place, and I'm going to do next and log in, and I know that user exists, and it's going to log me in, and I'm all good. Of course, I can edit or do whatever. It should all work as is. None of the stuff has changed. If you're not familiar with this application, I would suggest please go look at some of my previous videos. It's just a very simple code application that maintains the users. That's all it is. And then, of course, we can try the other login, which is the Auth0 one. And as you can see, it gives me the prompt. I can try the Google, and I'll try this. And there you go. And it is there, logged in, and it's all nice and dandy. So the application is working fine. And just to show you, or here's, of course, all the outputs and everything. I can try a different server. So I still have my client up. I can try like maybe there's MongoDB with Springboot, but I just did the MongoDB with Express. I can try like the MySQL version. If you go to the MySQL, like to see the server and the Springboot JWT and MySQL, that is what the Springboot MySQL version is. And again, this is where the Node.js was in the application folder on the user management, and this is where the MongoDB is. So you can try any of those servers, it's going to work. And then here, you want it to do, first of all, make sure that you have Java installed. I'm assuming you do. Then all you got to do is run this nvn maven clean and springboot run, and of course it will go ahead and do the install compilation, and it's going to go ahead and start the server. And it is up, and you can go back here and it's like I have a different user and password, and of course I can log in. As you can see, it's all good, it's all working, no problem. You can go with this one as well, and it does that, log in, and it understands all this, and it's all good. Just want to log out, and then try the Auth0 as well, and I want to make sure everything is good, and it is good. There you go. It just took a while, that's all. Now that you see that the application is working, let's look at the code. And the code, there's a lot of changes that I have to do, of course, on the client side and on the server side both. So let's look at the client side first. In the client side, of course, if you remember that the first thing that happens is when you log in, right, you have to go to the login page, right? We'll start from there. So in the login page, the first thing I had to do is, of course, add all of these other login, right? So we used to have this login right here, login using normal login process, right? Login and the message like this, and it would just literally submit the form. And if you remember, the form is basically just calling this onSubmit function, right? So now I added two more buttons in there. One is calling sign in with Okta, and the other one for the Auth0 sign in with Auth0, because I added all the icons and stuff. So let's look at those methods that I added brand new. Again, I'm referring to the code that I've already discussed. So I'm not going to discuss all of the code in details. If you really wanted to look at the other videos, go ahead, take a look at these videos where I kind of extensively talk about the different servers and client codes and all that. So I'm only going to talk about the differences that I've just added. All right. So first of all, is the sign in with Okta. All it does, if you could see that it just clears the session and sets some variable what type of sign in it's going to be, because I need to know on the back end what type of sign in it is. Based on that, I have to do some magic, right? And then this is actually literally Okta code, right? This is Okta code, sign in redirect. That's not my code. I'm just getting a reference to the Okta auth and then just calling. Same thing with Auth0. I'm just clearing the Auth0 session. It's a similar process that you see in setting what type of login it is. And this is literally the Okta service method that I'm calling, login with redirect. Now, what did all this thing came from, right? So like, what do I get reference of all of these, right? If you go look at the top, some of the other stuff that happened. I had to add reference to this. I had to add reference to this. I also had reference to this. That means I needed these three libraries, right? So I added these three libraries as an extra as part of this. And then this is where I'm importing all of this thing. Of course, and some of these things are, of course, ingested or injected inside the constructor here, as you can see. Auth service, there's Okta auth, its configuration information, and the auth service. All of these things are in there, right? And of course, there's some other cool things that happened is I created a common sign-in method, and eventually what's happening is in um, in the uh, in the normal on submit, if you remember, on submit is the one that is the normal login. This guy is also calling that same sign-in method, right? All of they're going to call the same sign-in method, just putting the username and the password, and also passing that what type of sign-in that it is, right? So this one, as you can see, this is the normal sign-in with the database authentication, passing sign-in normal, and I'll show you in a second what the other two does. And then, of course, it does clear session similarly for the normal login. And it does login form validation because this relies on the login form, and it sets the type. Now, let me go step back a little bit. If you go to app module TS, this is where I also import my stuff. Right? Here's the Auth0 module that I imported, and then of course there's the Okta callback configuration that I had to add. So this is what's being called or used, if you remember. And here you see that all that environment that we set, this is where the information coming from: Okta domain, client ID, and all that other information. And here's Okta callback that we set up, right? So this one listens to this. The other thing I had to go change. Let me go back to the router because we need to have those router, right? We have Okta callback. We also have Auth0 callback. So I had to go to the router module, and the router module, I added the Okta callback, and I also added the Auth0 callback. As you can see, this is the standard code. All these are just saying that, hey, make sure that this router exists, and this one is just doing an Okta callback component. And in this one, I added my own component to accept the callback, and then we'll do something about it. And I'll show you in a second each of these two. First, let's look at the Auth0, what it's doing. So in Auth0, if you look at this, all this thing has is basically I added this component, and right now we're interested in only the HTML. You'll see that when we log in on Auth0, it actually shows a spinner. That's a spinner that it shows, so it actually helps. While in the process of login, you can show login in progress. That's what that is. And what happens in the code is all it's doing is, if you look at it, it is first of all getting the sign-in type, because which has been set in the session storage, if you remember, and it's saying that, look, it only executes this code if the sign-in type is Auth0, which makes sense, right? Then it is getting literally the token values, right? It's getting the user. This is actually coming from the Auth0 service. Again, this service is injected from the component that I showed you, and of course I have to add that component in here. As you can see, all these components are added right here because it's kind of like a separate component that I have to add that is before the login. So you cannot use it like the rest of the component. Anyway, so it is when you get the user, and then with the user, you basically make some calls. Here, what I'm doing is literally parsing out the token, and again, this is based on the domain ID and client ID. You can actually parse out the access token, and out of the access token, also I'm getting the nickname is nothing but the user ID, and I'm getting the email because I'm going to need those two for validations, right? Once I have those two, I'm setting up some values in the session storage, right? I'm setting that nickname, I'm setting that email, I'm also setting that access token. So those are all set there properly, right? So that's all it's happening at that moment. And then anything that goes wrong, that of course I'm putting it into error message so that in the front end page, in the login page, it can show it. So you will see that that is going to be captured and being shown. And then just forward that to the login page. That's what this is saying. Now, what's happening in the login page? So that's what Auth0. Okta, I don't need to do much. Okta actually, it has a built-in Okta return component that I'm using. That let me show and return. I remind that. So that's what I'm using from this Okta standard modules. And then let's go back to the login. In the login, all it's doing is ng init is doing a whole bunch of magic. So in ng init, first of all, I'm getting the callback error message, if there's any callback error message sitting into this, so that in the process that you'll see in the sign-in process right here, because eventually it calls the sign-in method. If something goes wrong, that is being set as a message, and that shows up in the front. as the status as user not found or whatever the message is. All right, so going back to the ng init, it is literally doing all the magic. It is saying that, hey, if it's signing in Okta, if the type is Okta, then we're literally getting, using Okta service and getting the Okta token and getting the claims. The claims is kind of like what's the username, what's the email, stuff like that, what's the access token. So what's happening is the username becomes the username and the access token kind of becomes the password, right? Because that's what's going to be validated in the backend to say, hey, is that really the valid token, and can I extract the right information from the right place, whether it's Okta or Auth0. Definitely to that, those people will be hacking. Okay, so that's for the Okta, as you can see, and then setting up again some information that we need from the session. Same thing, similarly in Auth0, we already kind of did the initial process of getting those information. So all we're doing is getting all those information out of the session storage and then setting it up in the right place so that we can pass it. And each of these things, you will see that eventually it's calling the sign-in method, right? In the sign-in method, it is passing, of course, the in this case the email and and uh, and the password and of what type of sign-in it is, right? That's for Okta, and then for Auth0, same thing. Is the nickname is the user ID, basically the access token that was retrieved, and the sign-in type. So that's all this is doing. And then now, if you go back to the sign-in is just grabbing all that information, right, and then calling the login payload. So that's the only thing that's changed in the login payload right now. Instead of user ID password, I'm also passing a type. That means because the backend needs to find out what type of logging it is. Is it an Okta? Is it an Auth0? Is it a normal database authentication? So that's pretty much it. The only other thing that I had to add is, and I'll talk about that at the end, is about making it more secure. I added the CSRF um, uh, check in there as well. So let's quickly look at the server-side code as well. So server-side code, for example, the couple of things that I have to do is definitely I'm going to go to the server.js, and nothing has been added there, as you can see. And well, other than the core options, and I will come back to it in a second. Um, but the users, a lot of stuff has been added. As you could see that I had to add like this guy right here. That means I need to verify the token, Okta token, and also I'm actually using normal, the JSON web token verification to verify the Auth0. But these two I had to add uh, for Okta verifier. Remember, we added this Okta auth domain in the environment variable. That's where it's getting it from to initialize this variable right here. And then for Auth0, we are also getting some stuff from the environment Auth0 domain um, to be able to actually read the public key. So that's all it needs to verify the token, right? So that's all this is doing right here, Auth0 public key, as you can see, and then those different types, right? And the only method that I changed in here is the login method, as you could guess, right? And login got a little bit more complicated. And again, if you're more interested in other methods, I already talked about it. So feel free to look at my previous videos. In the login method, as you could see, that it has a lot of changes than the last code. First of all, I'm getting the user based on the username. That is the first thing I'm doing. And if it's not null, that means if they have a value at least, then what's happening is I'm trying to find out what is the type of authentication they're using. If it's Okta, it's pretty simple code, as you can see. It's it's verifying the access token using the Okta JWT verifier, and this is where all the default stuff and as you can see, the access token is in the password. So definitely that's what you're passing, and then it verifies the Okta JWT, and if it's verified, that's all good. If it's not verified, it will actually say that token failed validation, and if that's the case, it's actually going to eventually throw an error saying that it's not a valid user, right? Because this would be null, right? If this is null and you happen to be doing an Okta, and then it will go eventually to this code that's signing in as Okta, but this becomes null, and of course you're not going to have an to um, 0 JWT, it's going to throw that message. So kick it out. And similarly, in Auth0, If you're checking if it's Auth0, then definitely it cannot be an Okta type. And then you have a public key, then you're verifying with JWT verify using the public key that we grabbed at the top that I just showed you. And then password is, of course, the token that is being passed. So we're verifying it there as well. And if it's not there, again, you're going to be kicked out. If it's none of those, as you could see, if it's not Okta or not Auth0, it's got to be a normal sign-in, or you're checking if it's normal sign-in. Then we are doing, this was kind of like the whole code, what we already have. And it's checking the password and all that with the hash and all that. And then other, if it's not any of those, of course, you're going to kick it out. So that's the only thing that has been changed in here as far as the Express JS is concerned. Now, of course, we're going to look at the Springboot. Let's just look at the Mongo or MySQL, because this is all the MongoDB. It will be similar code, whether you look at the MongoDB or the MySQL, because it's a Springboot code. There was several changes, right? And I'll talk about the CSRF later on. The first thing is, of course, in the security. The security configuration, I can no longer rely on my own authentication manager, because before we had an authentication manager here just checking the normal DAO based, because it's not DAO based anymore. It's a custom authentication provider. I have to check it based on who has logged in, and not necessarily who has logged in, what type of service it has been using, like what is the login type, whether it's a Okta or Auth0 or something else. So I had to kind of get rid of the default authentication manager here, and that's what you will see, that it's gone. Because I added some other code for course configuration and also CSRF token, and I'll talk about that briefly at the end. But that also adds more security to this application. So the thing that I have to add is this custom authentication provider, as you can see right here. So this is the whole meat of the thing that's doing all that mumbo jumbo that kind of we saw on we did on the Express.js. Here, it's basically implementing the authentication provider, and then it automatically gets loaded as the default authentication, right? And we got a whole bunch of stuff defined, as you could see. This is for our user password, password in the database authentication. That's for that, and that's for that. But the rest of the stuff you see, this is for Okta and Auth0, right? These are actually coming out from the environment variables, so you can actually go look at the properties. This is being read from the properties. So in the properties file, of course, I have to add these, as you can see right here. There's Auth0 issuer, it's loading from the properties, the domain, Auth0 domain, Auth0 audience, and Okta domain, and all that stuff. So these are the stuff that has been added. Same thing you will see on the MongoDB as well. All right, so coming back to the authentication provider code, so it's loading it from there, and this is the access token verifier for the Auth0. That's the access token verifier for the Okta. So it's doing both of them, right? As you can see that initially it is literally initializing all of this thing, right? It's initializing an Okta verifier. JWT verifier is also initializing the JWT provider, and then let me just put this code back because they are not, should be here. And then in authenticate, this is the main method, right? First of all, I'm getting the current HTTP request, getting the JSON parameters, because again, I need to read not only user ID password. User ID password is the default one that automatically gets read by the authentication, but I need to read the type. So that's why this type needs to be read as a JSON parameter, because it's doing a post. And then based on that, I'm saying, hey, look, if that thing is blank, it's not a valid login, right? We need that request attribute. It's throwing it out. Otherwise, we're getting user ID password. And then again, similar drill. If it's an Okta, it's getting the Okta token from the password, validating it, all that. There's another method that you can go and look at right here that does the valid token is just literally calling the Okta verify and decode the token and getting stuff out of it. It's getting the user ID out of it, and then it's checking the user ID if they're the same, that what has been in there as the username, and then it is getting the load by username, and then of course in setting up this authentication stuff. Similarly, Auth0 doing the similar thing. In Auth0, it's using the normal decode JWT thing to verify the token. So this is another method that you can go and look. This is something, again, it's using the JWT verifier. This is for Auth0, that's what they recommend. It's literally using their public key to just verify it, and that's all it is from their domain. So that's all. Once it's verified, then it's good to go. then you can just go ahead and load the user, and this is great. And this is the last piece that, not the least, this is exactly how it used to work before, right? You would just log in, and then you get the user details, and then you need to match the password, right? Match it with the hash. So it's doing that, and then it's sending you the rights. You can. I'm not going to log you in. So that's all that has been added in here. So this is the main piece that is there with the security configuration. Now that I said that I'm going to talk about what other things I have done, I've also added the CSRF validation and CSRF protection as well. I'll show you. Okay, as far as the CSRF protection is concerned, I had to add a CSRF controller advice to make sure that any request that comes in, that I need to create literally a CSRF cookie, right? That is the only way to do it actually for REST API calls, right? So that's the controller advice. Then I also have a filter created that you will see. That filter is called CSRF cookie filter. And this cookie filter is the one that is literally creating the cookie, the CSRF token as a cookie, right? And then I had to go to security configuration, and there I have, it used to be, if you look at the previous code in the old videos, you will see that it was disabled. Not a good idea. And that's why I had to add this thing to say that, hey, look, you have to make sure that we are using a specific handler, that is this guy right here, token handler that is being used. And again, this code right here is all literally it's suggested by Springboot code itself. So I added that handler, and then I have also added in the security that the cookie is created by the CSRF cookie filter. So that filter gets called once per request. Some of the stuff that you also see here, like the content caching filter, cache body, server request, these three things I had to add because what happens is this is really sensitive. We are trying to tap into the servlet request even before the login. And if you know about the servlet request, it is basically only gets read when it is in the controller. Now we have to read this thing even before going to the controller. That's why I have to cache it so that I can at least read the type and the username and password, right? Or the token. So that's why this is being used, and this only stays, of course, in the server side. And so those are the three there. Now, as far as the client side on the CRF token, let me show you what that does on that side. Uh, Actually, before going there, let me also show you the same thing or similar thing that I had to do on the server side. It's right here. So right here, what I had to do is in the course origin, I have to add this thing right here. I had to whitelist, of course, um, the Angular 4200, right? Because that's the only accepted client that I'm going to get. And also added one more parameters in here, as you can see, credentials equal to true. That automatically protects for CSRF. It will send and it will accept the CSRF token every time the API gets called. So that's that. Now, and the client, what I have to change to get all of this thing into place is if you go to the interceptor, there's something funny happening now, right? I have injected one of these things called token extractor, as you could see, and this is that XSRF token, as you could see right there. So all it's doing is it is getting that XSRF token, extracting it out, from the using this. It is actually part of the header, and then it is making sure that it is a correct one, it exists, and also it is appended automatically into the header, because that is what we need. That is what the post will accept when you hit submit, and then it makes a post call or a put call or delete any of those. So this code has been added, basically just adding that token, read the token from the cookie, and then add it back to the header for resubmission and for subsequent request. So that's all that has been added. Other minor changes I had to do to support this thing is kind of like in the logout. So you will see that in this code right here, when it does a logout, and if it happens to be Okta, of course I'm calling this sign out with Okta, and that is what does kind of like the logs you out from the Okta first, and then it does the rest of the other cleanup. And then same thing for Auth0, I'm just clearing out all the Auth0 stuff, and then of course doing the rest of the other thing that needs to happen. And of course, some code right here as a support code is right here, all the constants that I have added, and those common methods, clear sessions, and all that. You'll see what is being cleared and what's not. So that's about it. And I know it's a lot of things in a very short time that I have to cover. And I know sorry I went over probably 40, 50 minutes, almost an hour. Anyway, I have covered a lot of stuff within a very short time, a lot of various concepts. But as you could see, this is a fairly complex topic, and you probably have to kind of look through the code to make sure that you understand all the bits and pieces. And if you don't, please feel free to use the YouTube comment sections. And also there is LinkedIn profile that I always put with the YouTube videos. You can contact me, feel free to do that. And also you can use my email to email me if you have any questions and concerns, and I really appreciate that. And also, if this video helped you in any way, whether to add certain skills to your skill bag or also solve certain problems, definitely I would like to hear about it. And also, please do subscribe and hit that bell icon so that you get notified with the subsequent video. And please spread the word. If anyone else needs this kinds of information, they can come back to my channel and look at the videos, and also even go to the GitHub page and check out the source code and go from it. So just to quickly recapture, now this flowchart has changed. As you could see, you have to register for the Okta and the Auth0. Then make sure you create and configure the user management application in those identity management services. Then set your environment variable correctly, all of these variables as we talked about. And then you can kind of do the other stuff parallelly, right? You can download this MongoDB database and all that stuff, set all that. The rest of the stuff stays kind of the same, which I'm not going to go through it. You can kind of look at the previous videos, but then the rest of the flow kind of aligns with what I had before. So that's the only thing that has changed, but it's basically checking out the code, then running the server after setting up those variables and configurations. That's all for today. Thanks for listening. You have a great one. Bye now.